Mark here again. So, what's missing from yoga? It's tempting when we have a practice we like, whether it's yoga or martial arts or dance or whatever, to think that it's complete, right? There's this kind of provincial way of looking at the world which says, oh, what I do is nice, therefore it's the best. And I get that. It's like, you know, I think my wife's the most beautiful woman in the world. She's my wife. It's my job to think that. I get that. But on another level, you know, we could say, yes, there are other beautiful women in the world, yeah? So it's important when looking at yoga to not think it's complete. It's complete. Now, because yoga is so big, we might be asking, like, what are we talking about? I'm talking about the standard Western modern postural yoga class, okay? Whether it's hatha or vinyasa or whatever. I'm sure, you know, everything I'm going to say, you could pull out some small example from some crazy Himalayan practice or something, but just generally as it exists today. Is it truly integral? Yeah. So there was an attempt by a guy called Ken Wilber and a group of his colleagues to create what's called an integral life practice. So this was the idea of a practice which built all the different parts of us that needed building, and they really mapped personal growth well in order to do that. Yeah. And yoga has some things it builds, like basic mindfulness, and I talked about this in What's Right with Yoga. Watch that video as well as this one, please. I talked about how it's good for state regulation and body awareness, and you know, there's lots, obviously, good stuff there. But what's missing, yeah? The big one for me that's often missing is some kind of relational practice. So we are people in relationships. If we want to develop our relational capacities, we need a relational practice, whether it be tango or capoeira or whatever it is. Yeah? Of course, you can do acro and partner yoga, and it's nice to see those taking off. But this solitary yoga class will not build those relational practices, and the same for solitary meditation as well, solitary tai chi. Yeah. So that's the main thing that I think is missing in terms of the sort of the really big ones. You know, from a movement point of view, we could say a lot's missing. I'm not a big functional movement expert. I've got one colleague who says not enough pulling movements and things like that, as opposed to pushing movements. Certain muscle groups are hard to exercise. That's not really my specialism. So I'm asking here what's missing from a personal growth point of view. But there's definitely stuff missing from an exercise point of view. It's not particularly good. I've had much better results strength training with weights or body weight than I have with yoga, aerobically as well. It might feel like you're getting a workout, but it's not a good aerobic workout, okay, even if it's a hard class. So moving on, back to the personal growth. Shadow work. So yoga doesn't so much work with the unconscious like therapy does. I think that's a big thing that's missing from yoga. It doesn't necessarily have to be added to yoga. In fact, it's quite tricky too in a class context. We do some exercise with that in EYP, but it's not the main place, I would say, for it. But just to know that that's a nice adjunct, something that could be added to your yoga practice. And I also think ethically why a lot of yoga and meditation teachers get in trouble, because they haven't done that shadow work. Yeah, they haven't done that work. And that's a Western tradition. So yes, there's aspects of it in Tibetan Buddhism and other things, but basically Western. Yeah. What else is missing? Comedy. Now this might sound like a funny one, but for me, humor, lightness, play, spontaneity is a massive thing as to who we are as people, and there's massive wisdom in it. And yes, you get laughter yoga, but it's not really what I'm talking about. Yeah. So improv for me is a great adjunct to this. More broadly, we could look at form versus freedom. So most modern postural yoga classes are what I call form classes, which is they're working with containment and discipline, and that's all good, but not so much with expression. So some do a bit, but not compared to, say, a 5 rhythms dance class where you're screaming and jumping about and letting it all out and letting the process of the body uncurl and unhappen naturally. So I think this kind of freedom and this process work for the body is often missing, and that can be added in. And, you know, one class I go to, we do a little bit of CatCow. Then the teacher just says, okay, do your own thing for a few minutes, just explore that. And some people are like, what? No instructions? And they really freak out. But over time, I've seen people get better at that since he introduced that. So it is possible to introduce that more spontaneous kind of freedom type work. I'd say another one is probably working with pleasure. So yoga often focuses on managing yourself in difficulty, like relax your brow, relax your jaw, common things, not so much working with pleasure. We have something called pleasure centering, you'll find if you Google that. Working with grasping as well as aversion. And that can easily be added into yoga by helping people note when they're attached to a posture, like when people are in Savasana and they're like, oh, I don't want to come out of it. Yeah, and actually getting them to breathe and relax and move between postures and being conscious about that, which is part of a yoga class anyway, right? That you're always changing postures. Yeah, I think for me the main thing that's missing is making it really practical for life, getting it off the mat, yeah, and that is of course the focus of this whole channel. For me, that's the main thing that's missing, is it's kind of a nice holiday, but not such a good classroom, and I would like to see yoga become a better educational environment for life, rather than simply a place to relax or to focus on health, which I think has been a bit overdone. No, it's a good foundation. So what have we got there? Yoga is a place for our mind, yes, for our body. Not so much the emotions. That domain is often a little bit missing from a lot of classes, really the emotional side of things. It's often spiritual or body and not this middle human part, yeah. The mind is often looked at. We've looked at the social part being missing, shadow side. I think we pretty much covered it. It's pretty good with states and state changing. Have a look at Ken Wilber's book, Integral Life Practice, and look at what in your own yoga or your own martial art, if you're a martial artist, and go, okay, what, I'm not saying that karate is complete or anything, and say, how could I make this more rounded? Sometimes there's some really quick, easy wins, like just getting people to be emotionally aware or do doing emotional check-ins at the beginning of class. And sometimes it's like the shadow work is a little bit tricky and you don't want to crowbar it in. You can have other practices as well. So that's what I think is missing from yoga. Please tell me what you think is missing for yoga in the comments, or defend yoga fiercely saying, no, I've got it all wrong, if you prefer. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, you can subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. More importantly, however, get the newsletter. So the newsletter you do, is that right? In the box here, okay. So why you would want the newsletter, so you hear about the best videos, so you actually ask me questions, you can reply to the newsletter, I'll reply. You can hear about events, teacher trainings, other things that are happening, and stay in touch more reliably. So newsletter there.